around for quite a while, about 9 years now. Tonight is the finale of this sermon series that we've been going through. And the sermon series is Chained by Sin or Chained by the Curse, but God, ... And so we've talked about things, kind of these core essential issues, these core questions, these core struggles that we all kind of deal with. Things like significance, identity, community, purpose, temptation, sex, pleasure. And tonight, we're capping everything off with ambition. So I felt like it was necessary to kind of share my own story, or a story of my own ambition in life. A big ambition in my life was to play basketball. Who played basketball in like a high school or junior high team? Give me a raise of hands. Okay, so we have a couple in the room. I loved playing basketball. It was back in like 6th grade. 7th grade, I tried out for the team. I thought I was going to do really well. Got cut in kind of that second round. And so it was the day after that, getting cut from 7th grade. And I was like, I'm going to make this team. I was like, you know what? We got 364 days to the next tryout, and I'm going to do everything possible in order to make the team next year. So every day I was out shooting. I was shooting in the snow. I was shooting in the rain. I was shooting in the sunshine. I even put rollerblades on my feet so then I could build up arm strength. I was in the gym. I was trying to get jacked. I did everything. I was on traveling teams as well. I was doing everything I could in order to get this desire of mine. Part of the reason I wanted to be on the 8th grade basketball team is that if you're on the 8th grade basketball team at Liberty Junior, Brandon can attest, you're kind of the king of the school. That was the popular clique. That was the group where everyone kind of wanted to be in that group. And so I was like, this is my ticket. This is my chance to somehow get into that popular group. Somehow girls like you if you're on the basketball team. So it's just I want to be on this team. So then the tryouts came. It was 3 days of tryouts. I slid through the first one, and then came day 2. Day 2. Have you guys ever played sports and you're just in the zone? Some people call it en fuego. You cannot be stopped. You're a force to be reckoned with. I was like the Black Mamba himself, Kobe Bryant. I just could not miss. I was shooting threes. I was doing fadeaways. I was blocking people. I was down I was like a rat. I was all over the place. Even to the point where the next day people were like, oh man, Andy, the coach he was talking in our class, and people have been saying that you're a shoo-in, man. You played great. Everyone thinks you're going to make it. And I'm just yes. Got one more day left. All I have to do is not screw up. It's play just well enough. I feel like I've kind of built a little bit of that cred already. All I need to do is just play well. Brandon was in that group as well. And that last day, played pretty well. Not great. But I'm taken into his office, and he tells me the news. No, you didn't make it. I was one of the last cuts. Have you guys ever had that dashed ambition? You're pursuing this dream, pursuing this desire. You have a drive to achieve this thing, and you don't get it. And I think that's true of all of us. I think what's true of all of us is that we all have ambitions. I define ambition as the drive to achieve. And let's be honest, you wouldn't be here at Ohio State if you didn't have ambition. Everyone's trying to achieve something. I hope you're at least trying to achieve a bachelor's degree. You might be trying to achieve other things as well. But I remember when I came to Ohio State my freshman year, and the big banner was, do something great. That you come to college and you believe that, if I'm going to get the bachelor's degree, but I also want to achieve greatness. I want to do something great with my life. So the question for us is, what is your ambition? What are you trying to achieve? This is kind of the first question in your bulletin, and I want you to really think about it tonight. There will be a couple questions, and this is the first one that's important. What is your ambition? What are you trying to achieve? I surveyed my community group and came up with three kind of general categories of what ambitions people have, at least here at Ohio State. But I think these categories go for, I'd say, all people. And the first one is a successful job, successful career. You know, you're pursuing that bachelor's degree, maybe that master's degree, that PhD. You're looking to have a job that'll make money, that will provide, a job where you'll be challenged, where there's a ladder where you can somehow maybe work your way up and be more challenged. I think that's pretty typical of most of us in the room. We want a job that's fulfilling, a job that's satisfying. The second thing is we want a spouse and we want kids. Or as my wife says, she wants to make a lot of babies or have a lot of babies. And this was the answer of most, sorry baby, this is the answer of most of the girls who answered, is they wanted to have kids. They wanted to have good kids, raise a good family, have a great marriage. The third one is kind of this weird category, but I kind of call it enjoyment. It's kind of like a lifestyle category. You have hobbies, you have things that you just kind of want to accomplish, kind of those bucket list things. For example, Felicia and I love to travel, and we created a kind of a 10-year bucket list, and things we want to do is go to France and go back to India. I really want to go to China and Africa. One of our favorite shows is No Reservations with Anthony Bourdain. And I'm just like, that is my life. That's the life I want to live. I just want to travel everywhere and eat a lot of good food and then experience a lot of the world. That's like, man, if that could be my ambition, I would want. Like, that's what I want. But it could be other things. It could be simply trying to make the next level on the video game. It could be, watching Ohio State win a championship next year because we won't have sanctions, but we need to get a better defense because we can't give up 49 points to Indiana. But it could be anything great or small, but some type of lifestyle or some form of enjoyment, just trying to enjoy life. Sorry, Jesse. It's kind of high up here. But here's the deal. None of those things that I've mentioned so far, none of those are wrong. You guys might, hear certain pastors just be like, having ambition is wrong, and this is wrong. All these desires you have are wrong. These aren't inherently wrong, these things. But there is a problem. Like, all these things are given by God, but there's a problem. And the problem is that we hijack these things. We hijack ambition and make them all about us. We hijack ambition and make it all about ourselves, all about us. The second question is basically, how do we know if we've hijacked ambition? And we're going to be reading a story tonight, kind of a contrast between two people, Saul and Jonathan. And if you want to flip to 1 Samuel 13, we're going to be talking about Saul first. To give you a background, Saul, at this point, had already been made king. He had fought a couple battles, and he's really trying to kind of gain the respect and gain the allegiance of the Israelite people. That's really the big thing that's going on here. So let's just kind of read verse 1, 1 Samuel 13. Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 42 years over Israel. Chose 3,000 men from Israel for himself. 2,000 were with Saul at Michmash and in Bethel's hill country, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. He sent the rest of the troops away, each to his own tent. Jonathan attacked the Philistine garrison that was in Geba and the Philistines heard about it. So Saul blew the ram's horn throughout the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." And all Israel heard the news. Saul has attacked the Philistine garrison, and Israel is now repulsive to the Philistines. Then the troops were summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines also gathered to fight against Israel, 3,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and troops as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They went up and camped at Michmash, east of Beth-aven. The men of Israel saw that they were in trouble because the troops were in a difficult situation. They hid in caves, thickets, among rocks, and in holes and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul, however, was still at Gilgal, and all his troops were gripped with fear. He waited 7 days for the appointed time that Samuel had set. But Samuel didn't come to Gilgal, and the troops were deserting him. So Saul said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings." Then he offered the burnt offering. Just as he finished offering the burnt offering, Samuel arrived. So Saul went out to greet him, and Samuel asked, "What have you done?" Saul answered, "When I saw that the troops were deserting me and you didn't come within the appointed days and the Philistines were gathering at Michmash, I thought, the Philistines will now descend on me at Gilgal. And I haven't sought the Lord's favor, so I forced myself to offer the burnt offering." Samuel said to Saul, "You have been foolish. You have not kept the command which the Lord your God gave you. It was at this time that the Lord would have permanently established your reign over Israel, but now your reign will not endure. The Lord has found a man loyal to him, and the Lord has appointed him as ruler over his people, because you have not done what the Lord commanded." Then Samuel went from Gilgal to Gibeah in Benjamin. Saul registered the troops who were with him, about 600 men. And later, if we go down to 14:2, it says that Saul was staying under the pomegranate tree in Migron on the outskirts of Gibeah with his troops. So here's the story. Saul's king. Saul wants to establish his rule, but there's a problem, and the problem is that the Philistines are there. The Philistines have kind of taken control of the land. So Saul wants to not only establish his kingdom, but he wants to gain the allegiance of the people. So he's like, I have to kind of destroy these people, get them out of the land. But there's also another problem. The Philistines are a huge army. Got 3,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and a lot of people. We'll just say 100,000 people, just for the sake of it. And then Saul's looking at his people. He's blown the ram's horn. And instead of all of Israel saying, "All right, let's go and fight these guys. Let's get them out of our land," people are actually hiding in caves and crossing over the Jordan and saying, "Peace, sayonara, I'm out of here. I'm not risking my life." And on top of that, his own men are deserting him. Only a fifth of his men stay, 3,000 to 600. At this point, Saul is humiliated. His ambition is to be king. His ambition is that people would esteem of him. His ambition is that he would beat the Philistines. But the very army that he would use is gone. So what does he do? He takes things into his own hands. He makes this offering to God, which only Levites can do. Saul's a Benjaminite. Only the Levites, the priests, can do these offerings. But he's like, God has to bless my life. God has to bless this battle that I'm going into. God has to bless my ambition, bless my plan. So I'm going to do this offering, find favor with God, and then we're going to go in and attack. Samuel comes flying in, and he's like, "Saul, what are you doing, man? You can't do that. You know better." Like, God was going to establish your reign, but now he's going to tear it away from you, eventually giving it to David. Saul leaves dejected, defeated, and just ends up underneath this pomegranate tree with his 600 men. Doesn't do anything. This is a story of hijacked ambition. This is a story of hijacked ambition. So the question is, how do you know? How do we know if we've hijacked ambition? Because the truth is, we could be just like Saul. Maybe all of us in this room are just like Saul. It's a possibility. So let's look at a couple things, a couple indications or indicators of how we can hijack ambition from the life of Saul. And the first one is in verse 3 and 4. Basically in verse 3 and 4, Jonathan goes and goes and attacks the Philistines. And what Saul does is he takes the ram's horn, blows the ram's horn, and everyone's like, Saul is basically attacking the Philistines. Let's go and follow him. So the first, and this is in your bulletin, the first one is we take credit for what we didn't do. We take credit for what we didn't or don't do. Saul's taking credit for Jonathan's bravery. He's taking credit for Jonathan's courage. But do we not do the same thing in our lives? We make our talents, we make our abilities, we make our circumstances, we can even make our own relationship with God all about what we did. We can take credit for that. Have you guys ever, you might not say this with your mouth, but you might be feeling this. You might say, well, I'm the one who got myself to Ohio State. I'm the one who got the grades. I'm the one who worked hard. You get a good grade on a test, and you're like, I'm good. I'm smart. I knew I would do well. Or even looking at God saying, well, I chose God. Or I'm a good Bible study leader. I know a lot of information. We kind of take these talents and take these abilities, and we try to get praise out of these talents and out of these abilities. We use them for our own gain. I think we all can do that. I think the second thing in here is in verses 6 through 12. The second point is we are frustrated when things don't turn out how we planned. We're frustrated when things don't turn out the way we want them to, the way that we had hoped for. Here Saul had this plan. His plan was to, basically beat the Philistines, be well esteemed, be praised, and it all starts falling apart. Have you guys ever had a situation like that in your life where, something started falling apart? You got a bad grade on a test. A breakup, some sort of failure. You're frustrated because something's not meeting your expectations, or it's not happening within your time frame. We get upset when we don't get what we want. I'm right with you guys. And this is a huge part, a huge area in my life. It's getting frustrated with the timing of things, getting frustrated. It's like, God, I thought you gave this desire to me, and why aren't you giving it to me? Why can't I do what I want to do, what I feel like you've called me to do? Saul's maybe thinking the same thing. You made me king, but what the heck? I don't have any army. So what do? We take it into our own hands. We move on forward. And just I'm going to do it. Even if you're not with me, I'm going to do it. Regardless. I think we all have done that. The third thing is that we are discouraged and stagnant. And this is in chapter 14 too. Where do we find Saul at the end of this whole story? Sitting underneath a pomegranate tree with his boys. Maybe that's where some of you guys are at as well. Is that you're just kind of in this place of apathy, in this place of stagnance. Kind of just floating around aimless. One quarter you're at Ohio State, another quarter you're not at Ohio State, one quarter you're on at Ohio State. I don't know which one, whether you're going here, you're not going here. Kind of just wandering around. You look at Saul, and he's pretty comfortable underneath that pomegranate tree. And I would say that it can be very true of us too. Kind of that failure to launch, that fear of making a mistake or fear of moving forward, so we just kind of remain in this state of comfort. Kind of lacking any desire, lacking any drive, lacking any ambition, not really leading anybody to anything. Maybe that's some of us. So where are you at? Which category? Which of these three do you think is most, connects with you most? Maybe you're just taking credit for, your abilities. You're taking the praise of all those accolades. Or maybe you're just kind of frustrated that life hasn't turned out exactly how you imagined it to be. Or things haven't turned out how you imagined them to be. Or maybe you're in a state of, kind of a failure to launch. Felicia and I and Caleb had an opportunity to visit our next door neighbors for Canadian Thanksgiving. Yes, Canada does have a Thanksgiving. It's about a month early. And they do the exact same things as what Americans do. I'll call it a knockoff. But, so they had like pie and everything like that and turkey, and it was great. But my neighbor and her friends they all have PhDs. So we're coming in here, we're sitting in front of them, and it's us three and all of them. And it's like, have you ever been in a situation where you feel so intimidated? You're like, I'm a schmuck. I don't have no idea. Like, these people are doctors, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. And they're like in psychology, so I know they're analyzing us, and we're like analyzing them, and we're like, who's gonna win that? But anyways, we started kind of feeling more comfortable, and Felicia and I were talking to this one girl in particular. She has her PhD. She is very ambitious, and she's gotten everything she's wanted. She wanted a PhD, and she got the PhD. And she's talking to us about how, her whole life is invested in research. Everything is research. And she's looking at us, and she's like, I can't turn it off. I can't turn my brain off. I'm driving down the street, I'm thinking about research. I'm taking a shower, I'm thinking about research. I'm eating, I'm thinking about research. Her whole life has been so driven by her own ambitions that she can't turn it off. And she's looking at us and she's like, I'm exhausted. It's absolutely exhausting to not be able to turn this off. I just don't think we were made to live like that. I don't think we were. I don't think we were intended to be enslaved to our drives and desires. I just don't think so. I don't think we were intended to be chained by our own ambition. I don't think this was God's plan at all. But I know that God has a better way. I know that God has a healthier view of ambition. I absolutely know that. And let's just go over to one more chapter over, because we're going to go through the story of Jonathan and see how Jonathan's life is different from Saul's life. So in 1 Samuel 14, start out in verse 1 and then we'll skip to 6. Verse 1, that same day, Saul's son Jonathan said to the attendant who carried his weapons, "Come on, let's cross over to the Philistine garrison on the other side." However, he did not tell his father. Verse 6, Jonathan said to the attendant who carried his weapons, "Come on, let's cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will help us. Nothing can keep the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." His armor-bearer responded, "Do what is in your heart. You choose. I am right here with you, whatever you decide." "All right," Jonathan replied. We'll cross over to the men and let them see us. If they say, 'Wait until we reach you,' then we will stay where we are and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come on up,' then we'll go up because the Lord has handed them over to us. That will be our sign." They let themselves be seen by the Philistine garrison, and the Philistines said, "Look, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they've been hiding." The men of the garrison called to Jonathan and his armor-bearer, "Come on up, and we'll teach you a lesson," they said. "Follow me," Jonathan told his armor-bearer, "for the Lord has handed them over to Israel." Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet with his armor-bearer behind him. Jonathan cut them down, and his armor-bearer followed and finished them off. In that first assault, Jonathan and his armor-bearer struck down about 20 men in a half-acre field. Eventually, they go on to win this battle. The question is, what things can we learn about ambition from the life of Jonathan? And the first one is that he had an ambition of submission. This is the first one in your bulletin of that second three. He had an ambition of submission. Verse 6, nothing can keep the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. That Jonathan's ambition was the mission of God. Jonathan's ambition was the mission of God. And the mission of God is He saves. He reconciles. Ed talked about that a couple weeks ago when he was talking about purpose. 2 Corinthians 5:20. That God is desiring all of us to be reconciled to Him. All of us to be saved to Him. That this is His mission, that He is reconciling His people to Himself. And this is the most important ambition. This is the problem, is that we have these ambitions, and these aren't inherently bad things, but they are not the ultimate ambition. They're just not. They're not the ultimate mission. We've made the mission all about ourselves. The ultimate mission is that God saves. That is the ultimate mission. That is the ultimate ambition. That is just predominantly, infinitely higher than any other ambition that we can have. Absolutely. You look at Christ Himself, and if we're going to ask ourselves the questions, are we followers of Christ? Then we have to ask the question of, well, what is Christ's mission? What was His ambition? And His ambition was to be submitted to the Father. His ambition was the mission of the Father. The mission of the Father being to save and to reconcile, even to the point where Christ was on a cross. I know we've heard this a million times, but think about that. Christ was so submitted. His ambition was so submitted. He is God Himself, and He decides to, I'm going to die on a cross for people who don't like me and are spitting in my face. That's unbelievable. His ambition was submitted underneath submission, underneath the mission of God. So what do we do with these other ambitions that we talked about earlier? Going to school, finding a spouse, a lot of the things that we're good at, the hobbies, nothing wrong with those. What do? We're going to Ohio State. We want to get married. I'm married. This mission is above all things, but these other ambitions, our other ambitions are merely used for this mission. These other ambitions are merely avenues or arenas to be able to promote this other mission, this other ambition. These are promoters. Your jobs. Your jobs are the areas where, you can go in there. And if you want to be an engineer, that is great. I'm not telling you to not be an engineer. But be an engineer that will reconcile people to Christ. That is your mission as an engineer. I work at Ohio State. My mission is to reconcile people to Christ. Whatever your job is, that is your mission. It's not to just be a good engineer. Be a good engineer, but that's not your mission. If you're a student, your mission is not just to be a good student, getting good grades. Do that. Work hard for that. But your mission is to be a dynamic ambassador in your classes, imploring people to be reconciled to Christ. In your relationships, in your marriages. Your marriages are not just for yourself. Your marriages are to draw people and bring people in and say, be reconciled to Christ. Felicia and I have had the privilege of having many of you into our house. We love hanging out with couples. and revealing the picture of Christ through our marriage. If you're in a relationship right now, ask that question. Is your relationship reconciling people to Christ? Is that the mission of your relationship? If not, it might need to be retweaked, put in the proper perspective. Your hobbies. If you like to play basketball, just invite people to play basketball and just somehow get connected to them. Somehow get influence in their life and try and reconcile them to Christ. I don't care what it is, what you like to do. That is where it's all about the proper perspective. We have become so obsessed, myself included, we get so obsessed with these ambitions. And it's just the wrong obsession. We're having obsession over the wrong thing. Our obsession is Christ. The second thing we can see in this passage is in verse 7. We have Jonathan's armor bearer. Let's put this in perspective. Jonathan's armor bearer, and he's just holding like the stuff. He's just like, I'll go wherever you go, Jonathan. Great. Jonathan is leading. There's 2 guys versus 100,000. Those aren't very good odds. I don't know if you guys can do math very well. Like, that's just not very good. Those aren't good odds. 2 against 100,000. Like, this is a death wish. And his armor bearer is like, all right, I'm going wherever you're going, man. If you think this is right, I'm going to follow you. The second one is that we will die falling forward. We will die moving forward. We're not going to be like Saul, chilling underneath the pomegranate tree, eating some pomegranates, in the shade, in the comfort. We're going to die moving forward. And I think the beauty of this is that, in life, by earthly standards, we might fail. We might actually try to attempt to do something for God, and we might fail. I know we can be so in our brains and analytical and well, what is God's will? What isn't God's will? I don't want to fail. I don't want to let him down. Just move forward. If you fail, it's okay. Romans 8:28, all things work for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his will and purpose. No matter whether something is ends up good or ends up bad or, is successful or failed, it's okay. He's going to use it for your good. We have the freedom to move forward. And as a body, we need to move forward. We might not see those immediate results. We might not see that earthly success. You even look at Christ himself. He didn't start any denomination. He didn't start a missions system or network. He didn't have, at his on the cross, where were his boys? His 12 right-hand men. One of them betrays him. The other one goes, his best friend basically denies him 3 times. Who is left at his cross? He didn't have thousands of people there. By all earthly standards, he was not successful. He was a colossal failure. By all earthly standards. But you know what he did? He died falling forward. He died to advance the gospel. He died to advance the mission of the Father. And the third one is his name, his praise. You look at Jonathan. The Philistines are telling him, all right, the Philistines are like, come on up. We're going to show you. We're going to teach you a lesson. Look at Jonathan's response. Follow me, for the Lord has handed them over to Israel. In this moment, if I'm Jonathan, and eventually, when God defeats the Philistines, if I'm Jonathan, I'm thinking I'm doing it. Saul, my dad, he's and all those other schmucks, they're just sitting, they've gone, they fled, they're hiding in caves, they're lazy, they're just kind of kicking back. I'm the one who's here, I'm the one advancing, I'm the one doing it, I'm the one charging forward. I'm the one who's slaying all these Philistines, Aren't I great? We could add a whole passage after this talking about how Jonathan is proclaiming his name and how Jonathan wants to be king now. That he's the one who's slain these armies. But no, he doesn't say that at all. He says the Lord has handed them over to Israel. His credit goes back to God. Everything goes back to God. His name, God's name, and His praise is the highest thing in Jonathan's life. And it has to be the highest thing in our lives. It's not about our abilities. It's not about our credit. It's not about what we can do, but it is about what He can do, His credit, His praise. So you might ask the question, well, what does this look like kind of like on a practical level? Give me a for instance, and I'll give you a for instance. In my life, I came into Ohio State and I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a sweet doctor. I wanted to, have the prestige of being a doctor, having that MD at the end of my name. I wanted to have a nice house. I wanted to have nice cars, 2.5 kids. When you're a doctor, people esteem you really well, and you might have some girls who are like, hey, you're a doctor. These are the things that I wanted. That was my ambition. My ambition was the typical kind of American dream. In the summer before my junior year, I was in a Bible study, and for some reason, God just obliterated that. It was like, this just isn't it. You can't live after this. This is selfish. Everything that you just mentioned, ... is all about you. Everything is all about you. And God transformed my ambition, my mission, and was like, no, I'm going to give you a greater mission. And your mission is to save. So my immediate reaction and my extremeness is, all right, well, I'm going to drop out of school, become a pastor, and live in a box. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, I don't care, I'm going to live for Jesus, everything. All right, little piece of advice. Don't drop out of school. Don't make knee-jerk reactions. It's a little piece of advice from me to you. But what God was doing in that is basically He was transforming my heart and saying, I'm going to purify your desires. I'm going to purify your drives. A couple months later, I was like, thinking about, I want to be a missionary in Africa. I want to be a doctor too. So why don't I be like a missionary doctor in Africa and like reconcile people in Africa? Why not? That sounds like a great idea. And that was what my whole drive for medical school became. Like, my purpose was to save. His purpose to save. So I planned, I prepared, I took the Kaplan MCAT courses and eventually made it to the MCAT. MCAT's a beast, if you don't know. At that point, it wasn't on a computer, it was paper, it was 6 to 8 hours long. Longest test that I can ever imagine. But 3 days before the exam, an exam I'd been preparing for like 4 months, I had the stomach flu. And I was literally I couldn't get out of bed. Maddie can attest. I didn't study 3 days straight. I was sicker than a dog. It's the day of the MCAT, and I am still sicker than a dog. And I'm like, Maddie, I don't know if I can do this. I don't even know if I can get to the place where I need to go. And I don't even know if I can make it through 6 to 8 hours of exam. I wrote these Bible verses on my chest and Sharpie marker, and I was like, all right, if whatever happens, it is not going to be my ability. It's not going to be my ability. It's going to be, God is going to carry me through this. It's not my credit. Not my credit at all. I made it through. And actually, I felt more confident. I felt better after that exam than I had all the other previous practice exams. I was like, I aced this. God helped me ace this test somehow. I'm coming in on crutches, and I'm leaving that exam running. He deserves the credit. The credit is his to get. Then you have, going through this process of applying. I got a pretty good score on the MCAT. So I'm applying, I'm waiting the whole summer before my senior year. I'm just waiting. And there's this point where I'm like, God, I don't know what you want me to do. I don't know what you're going to do. Either you're going to, like I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to be a missionary. That's what I want to do. Or what do you want me to do? If that doesn't happen, what's my backup plan? And I'm like, well, I don't know what my backup plan is except I'll be a pastor who lives in a box. I'll go and do like ministry. I'm like, whatever you do, literally, I'm holding out my hands. I'm like, God, if you're going to give it to me, then you're going to give it. But if you're not, then you're going to take it away. It is okay. Whatever you want. I get the envelope, open it up, and it's a rejection. I get another envelope about a month later, and it's another rejection. I look at Maddie. I'm like, let's go celebrate. Let's go to the nicest Italian restaurant in Columbus. And we went and celebrated. Because I was like, you know what? God just didn't want this for me. But he has something better. This is actually for my good. I did not look at it as a failure at all. Like Christ just had something better for me. Had something other planned. And he can give it and he can take it away. I could be a doctor right now. I'd still be reconciling people to Christ. That's what my aim would be. That's what my goal would be. I could be in Africa as a missionary reconciling people to Christ. Or I can be right here, standing where I'm at, trying to reconcile people to Christ. Doesn't make any difference. Hands wide open. You give and you take away. It's absolutely okay with me. So the question for you guys is, where are you at? Are your ambitions submitted or are you holding on? Are you holding on to them? And maybe tonight is your first opportunity. Maybe it's the first opportunity you've had to actually lay that down. Lay down these ambitions, the things that we had talked about, all those categories, lay them down and say, God, here you go. I'm going to pick up a new ambition. I'm going to pick up my cross. I'm going to pick up your mission. And I'm going to move forward. And maybe some of those old things will come, and maybe some of them won't. But I have something so much better, a treasure that's so much more valuable. Not going to be enslaved to that. I'm going to be free to move forward. So I'm going to pray with us. I want the band to come back up. I just want you guys to really ask that question. Are your ambitions submitted, or are you hanging on to them? Is your ambition an ambition of submission, or is your ambition something else altogether? I'm just going to pray for us. Heavenly Father, God, I pray that, Lord, we can be so easily obsessed about things that are good things, but not the best thing, not the greatest thing, God. And Lord, I pray that you would rewire our hearts. God, that our ambitions wouldn't be something that would take control over us, but that your ambition would be the desire of our hearts, God. That your mission would be what we burn for, what we're passionate about. God, you have to do the change in us. And Lord, tonight we just lay down these things that we desire, these drives that we have, these ambitions that we have, and we lay them at your feet and just say, you give and you take away. God, help us to move forward like Jonathan, fearlessly, boldly, knowing, God, that with you there is no failure. There's only victory. So Lord, we just thank you for you and your cross, and cry out that would be the bedrock, the anchor of our lives, God.